the one-to-one help, which is at the forefront and pioneer in the employee assistance program industry in India. Our objective for this session today shall be to help you all understand anxiety and discuss its various types and causes and provide effective strategies to cope and thrive. I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker for today. We have with us Ms. Vidya Vincent, a distinguished psychological counselor from One-to-One Health. I welcome you, ma'am, Vidya Vincent, ma'am. And I also extend a warm welcome to all our esteemed seniors, colleagues, and family members who are connected with us right now through Microsoft Teams and through our YouTube channel. So, without any further delay, let us start the webinar. So, we have with us Ms. Vidya Vincent, who is an experienced mental health professional. Ms. Vidya Vincent has completed her undergraduate studies at Christ College and her MSW in Medical and Psychiatry from Christ University. She has worked with various schools as counselor for 3 years. At One-to-One Health, she has counseled over 900 employees with around 5,000 plus hours of sessions dealing with issues such as premarital relationships, marital conflict, addiction, parenting, and abuse, and many more. She has also conducted numerous workshops on communication, stress management, mindfulness, work-life balance, and anxiety for companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Deloitte, IBM, Tata Steel, TCS, and Mindtree. So I would now like to hand over the session to Ms. Vincent. Ma'am, we are eager to hear your insights on understanding and managing anxiety. The session is now yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Shani. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to each one of you present here for the session today. My name is Vidya, and I'm a senior counselor with One-to-One Help. As you all are aware, One-to-One Help is your EAP partner, that is your employee assistance program. And the primary service that we provide is counseling. I would be speaking a little about it towards the end of the session. But today we are here to talk about a topic I think that sparks a lot of discussion wherever I go. Anxiety. A lot of us experience it in different ways, at different intensities. On a day-to-day basis sometimes, and it gets a little too much and overwhelming for us to understand, how is it that we can manage anxiety better so that we are able to thrive in the environment that we are in. So I'm really glad that so many of you could make it for the session today and are looking forward, to the discussion that we hold. Before we start with the session, I want to quickly understand from each one of you that what brings you here. What is it that you all are looking at when you're, attending this session? What is it that you would like to take away from today's session? If you all could share your responses in the chat, I could pick it up from there.
Good afternoon. Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm sorry, your voice is a little low.
Okay, ma'am. Now I clearly.
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
Ma'am, actually, anxiety thoughts came in my mind many times, and it's very hard to cope with it. And the most situations that arrive in my life is that whenever I have three options in my life, and then it is very difficulty to choose among these, and after that I feel that I'm very anxious, not able to focus on my work, and it results that I lost all my time. Instead, if I focus in one area, then it will benefit. But when I think that I will improve in my next life, but the same thing.
I'm sorry, if you could speak up. I would request everyone to put themselves on mute. Yes, please go ahead. If you could speak up a little.
Yes, ma'am. So this is my issue. My anxious thoughts will come in some bad dreams will come that this will happen to my family. What will I do?
Okay,
And
so you're also saying that, when you feel anxious, you've noticed that it pretty much disrupts everything in your day-to-day life, and it becomes difficult for you to get back to focusing on the task at hand. And, then there is delay, then there is you not being able to sleep better. Probably your appetite also gets affected, right? So you're here to see how is it that you can manage that better.
most importantly, ma'am, I lose concentration, and due to this, I lost my time.
Right, right. All right, all right. So, I mean, thank you for, getting the ball rolling. Definitely, these are some of the aspects that we would be discussing as to how is it, firstly, to understand anxiety is very, very important. And then from there, what are some things that we can do in order to help us um, find it easier to handle or feel more adept in handling some of our situations. So thank you so much for sharing your responses. I can see there are a number of responses I've received in the chat. Tools to be present and aware, how to come out of anxiety, manage anxiety, coping with people who cause us anxiety, especially in upper positions. So I'm guessing someone in a powerful position that you're talking about. Best practices to overcome anxiety, managing mental health, to live in present and not be anxious about future. There are certain incidents which we do not know may not bring bad results, but even then anxiety prevails. How to control that? Absolutely. How to manage high expectation to perform, excel in each activities in office and home and day-to-day life. How to stop overthinking. Wonderful. I think you all have, really shared some crux of what each of us go through when it comes to anxiety, and how is it that we can manage it better. So, yes, someone's raised their hand. Would you like to say something, or was it by mistake? Okay. All right. So, I think, thank you so much for all your responses. And today we are going to cover all of these bits that you all have mentioned. Anxiety is something that can be created by our environment, it can be created internally. What is it is what we'll get into. So before we get into anxiety, I want to also ask you all that is fear and anxiety the same according to you all? Do you all think it's the same or is it different?
I think anxiety is the result of fear.
I'm sorry, Lucky, I'm unable to hear you. If you could respond on the chat, I think I'll be able to pick on your response.
Anxiety comes because of fear.
Okay. Okay. All right. Any responses in the chat? Fear is one of the causes of anxiety. Lovely, lovely. So, imagine you're about to give a presentation to your colleagues or clients, and, as the moment approaches, your heart starts racing, your palms get sweaty, your mind begins to race with thoughts of all the things that could go wrong. You feel like a knot in your stomach and, an overwhelming sense of dread, even though you've prepared thoroughly. And this is a common experience for many people with anxiety, where everyday tasks feels like daunting challenges. So, why did I ask you about fear and anxiety? Is because according to a survey by the National Mental Health Survey, it says that around 3.5% of India's population suffers from some or the other form of stress or anxiety related disorder. This was a study that was done in 2016. When you hear 3.5, it seems like a very modest figure at first, but it amounts to more than 40 million Indians, which is quite a large number. So the reason we need to talk about the difference between fear and anxiety, and as you all mentioned, it's right, is because fear is more like an emotional response to a known or definite threat. So let's say, for example, if you're walking down a dark street, for example, and someone points a gun at you and says, this is a robbery, and you're likely to experience a fear response. So the danger there is real, it is definite, and it is immediate. There's a clear and present object of the fear that you're having. While anxiety, what it does is it's an unpleasant, vague sense of apprehension. It's often a response to an, imprecise or unknown threat, such as, let's say, the uneasiness you might feel walking down a dark street alone. Your uneasiness in this situation would be caused by, anxiety related to the possibility of something bad happening, such as being harmed by a stranger, or rather than an immediate threat. So this anxiety stems from your mind's interpretation of the possible danger. So, another example that I could give you is of the smoke detector and the looming storm. Okay, so fear is more like a smoke detector in your house. It's like an alarm system that goes off when there's an immediate threat or danger present, such as, let's say, a fire or an intruder. And just like the smoke detector alerts you to take immediate action to protect yourself, fear prompts you to respond quickly to a current threat. And anxiety, on the other hand, is more like seeing dark clouds gathering, signaling the possibility of a storm. Even though the storm hasn't arrived yet, you can feel a sense of unease and anticipation about what might happen. And similarly, anxiety involves worrying about potential threats or dangers that may or may not materialize in the future. So when we are talking about, fear and anxiety, it's important to remember fear is for a definitive threat. Anxiety is for a situation that we perceive could be, problematic or could arise some kind of conflict or difficulty or challenge for us. So there is a difference between fear and anxiety. And remember the smoke detector and the looming storm example to understand the difference. Now, it's important to also understand that who are the people who are at risk of developing anxiety. So, one thing that is very important for all of us to understand is anxiety can affect people of all ages, genders, and backgrounds, but certain factors may increase an individual's risk of developing anxiety. Now, these risk factors can be biological, they can be environmental, or related to personal experiences also. So, some of the common factors that contribute to the increased risk of developing anxiety is genetics and family history. So, there is evidence that suggests that genetics play a role in the development of anxiety disorders. If there are individuals with a family history of people who've experienced anxiety, which are not diagnosed, but they've shown certain, signs and symptoms, they may be at a higher risk of developing them themselves. Brain chemistry and neurobiology. So, imbalances in our neurotransmitters, they have been implicated in the development of anxiety disorders. So, difference in basically our brain structure and function, particularly in regions involved in threat processing or emotional regulation, it may also contribute to anxiety risk.
अच्छा तो बोल देना बैगन है
Family and environmental
उससे बन जाएगा
factors. Family and environmental factors. So, family dynamics, parenting styles, socioeconomic status, environmental stresses can all influence an individual's risk of developing anxiety disorders. Sometimes, adverse childhood experiences, or which sort of include, parental conflict or unstable home environments or exposure to violence in itself can increase the vulnerability to, someone experiencing anxiety later in their life. Chronic stress, something we don't pay a lot of attention to. So what happens is when there is a prolonged period of exposure to stress or any kind of chronic stress, such as work-related stress, financial difficulties, relationship problems, so many of you, a lot of times we feel that there is, there are concerns related to our identity. There are concerns related to sometimes the spouse moving into a different location or you having to keep moving locations. All of that create a sense of stress, and when that stress is not managed for a longer time, which is why we say prolonged period of time, it turns into anxiety because one is not able to understand how is it that you can manage it. So the chronic stress part that we are talking about, it can actually dysregulate the body's stress response system, and it contributes to the development of anxiety symptoms. Personality traits. Sometimes, certain personality traits such as people who want everything to be perfect, or neuroticism or a tendency to worry excessively may increase vulnerability to anxiety disorders. Like I remember very recently, I had a session with one of my clients, and he was telling me that every day he has to go to office, but every day until he reaches office, he is in a state of anxiety. Every day before he goes to bed, he's in a state of anxiety, because of which, even though he, lies on bed by maybe 11 o'clock in the night, but he does not get sleep until 3. And by the time he realizes it's 3 a.m., he's worried because, he has to wake up by 6:30, help his children get ready for school. He has to also get ready, make sure that he catches his office shuttle. So there is, so much anxiety around doing something that we do on a daily basis. So again, certain personality traits also can predispose individuals to heightened sensitivity to stressors and difficulty coping in certain situations. Substance abuse. Now, substance abuse can include alcohol, it could include drugs, it could include certain prescribed medications. All of this can increase the risk of developing certain anxiety disorders. In fact, substance abuse can exacerbate anxiety symptoms and interfere with our effective coping ways also, sometimes it leads to a cycle of dependence and anxiety. So it's important to note that while these factors may increase the risk of developing anxiety, they do not guarantee that an individual will develop an anxiety disorder. Okay, so now I want to ask you all that what do you all think are some of the most common signs of anxiety that you might have experienced or seen someone else experiencing? Anything that you have noticed yourself? Okay, I can see there is a, feedback for one-to-one. I will definitely look into this. Abhay, I will, check with you on what the concern is. So going back on the question that I asked, some of the common signs of anxiety: sleep disorder, shaking of different body parts like hands and legs. So I'm asking you, what are the common signs that you've noticed, where, like I said, sometimes when you have a presentation, you feel that your heart is racing fast, or, your palms are getting sweaty. So something like that is what I'm asking, what you've noticed. Body heating, sweating, sweaty palm, yes. Insomnia, anger, yes. Fear of unknown things, absolutely. Variation in breath and BP. Forgetfulness, absolutely. Dryness in mouth, yes, yes. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for all your responses. And yes, you're right. When we are talking about the physical signs, anxiety can manifest itself in a variety of physical, emotional, cognitive, behavioral symptoms. It's important to note that individuals may experience anxiety differently, and not everyone will experience all of these symptoms. And some of the common signs is what you're seeing on the screen right now. There is a rapid heartbeat that we've noticed, or shortness of breath, sometimes muscle tension or sweatness, pain. There is sweaty palms that you've noticed, headaches or migraines. Emotionally, you might have noticed that, you're feeling too restless, you're not able to focus. There is irritability because you have a lot of things to be completed, but you're not able to focus, and that is taking away from your time. Mood swings again, because again, for the same reasons, that you are not sure why you're feeling anxious or why you're feeling restless, but it is sort of leading you to a path where you are not able to really gauge why are you feeling the way you're feeling detached from ourselves or the reality. So some of the emotional and physical signs are these. Some of the cognitive and behavioral symptoms is what, like racing thoughts or mind, going blank. Sometimes you must have noticed, right? Your mind is going blank. You're not very sure that why did this happen? Like, again, the same thing. I had another client who mentioned that even if sometimes he knows the answer to something, when someone asks a question, he just finds it really difficult to answer. He suddenly go blank. And then through sessions, we explored and we understood that my client has difficulty with performance anxiety. So wherever he knows that his performance is going to be judged, for example, in a team meeting where he has to speak, or in a presentation where he has to say something, or let's say in an interview where they are going to, judge him on his performance, or back at home where, as a son, as a husband, as a brother, he has the power to make a decision, and he's worried if his decision will sit right with everyone else who is, relying on him for that sense of information or for that decision to be made. So sometimes, people notice they go blank because they're feeling anxious in that situation. In my client situation, like I said, he has performance anxiety. So wherever there is performance related concerns, people suddenly find themselves in a very vulnerable state, which leads to difficulty in decision making, problem solving. There's something called as catastrophic thinking as well. So catastrophic thinking is like imagining the worst case scenario. It's called in psychology, it's called a cognitive distortion. Cognitive distortion is how you think and how you behave because of your thought. So it is a cognitive distortion. By distortion, we mean that it's not a real state of thought. Your mind, it breaks it down into a different situation altogether, which may or may not happen. So catastrophic thinking occurs when people have a hard time weighing the likelihood of a certain outcome and believe that terrible or catastrophic outcomes could happen, which are highly unlikely. But in the mind of the individual, it is definitely going to happen. Like you all must be, you all must remember as well that, when you are in a place where you are, probably worried about, let's say, a result that you're waiting for, or you've been told that you might get a promotion and you're waiting for an email that will state something about it. You might notice that you start to feel very worried because you know that you have opponents, or you have colleagues who've done equally well, and you're very worried that if I'm going to land it. So in our head, there is only two scenarios. One is either I get the promotion, second, I don't get the promotion. But there could be multiple other outcomes which the mind isn't able to really process. The other part is hypervigilance. So it is, overly being alert of any potential threat. So it is like an elevated state of constantly assessing potential threats around you. And it is often a result of any kind of trauma that you would have faced. It could be that, you had a bad accident, or you had a theft in your house, and while you were inside the house, someone walked into your house and you had a bit of a situation. It leaves you with a trauma. You're worried about it. Or very recently I had a client who had come in, and she became a new mother 2 months back. And for her, the trauma was that during her pregnancy, like the 2 days that she was in the hospital during childbirth, she did not have a lot of support from her in-laws. And because of that, her spouse, her husband also could not help her much. That trauma has stayed with her. It's been 2 months. The baby is fine. She's also doing well. Everyone in the household is now helping. But those 2 days in the hospital when she was struggling and wanted help, what she did not get, now she's become more hypervigilant. So even if someone is being nice to her, she's always, double checking that, are they being nice to me, or is it that I am feeling that way? Or are they really wanting to help me? Or is it that they're doing it just because I asked for it? So, there's a lot of hypervigilance that comes around because it's often a result of trauma, as I said. And people who, might have been combat but survived those kind of, let's say, abuse or any post-traumatic stress disorder can exhibit hypervigilance. So, an example again could be hypervigilant people will be on the lookout for threats that are either unlikely or, exaggerated. So this may also lead to difficulty concentrating or focusing on tasks, memory problems, forgetfulness, like you all mentioned. And behavioral symptoms, like we said, there could be certain avoidance behavior where you're avoiding situations or activities that will trigger anxiety. I think someone in the chat had also mentioned that how do you deal with people who are in a powerful position and, constantly induce stress within you, or constantly make your environment very anxiety driven. So sometimes if that is not taken care of well, as a result, people can get into avoidance behavior, wherein you start to avoid this individual because, if I go there, I am going to be feeling anxious. And so that happens. Or, some people may be very restless. That could be something that happens. In behavioral ways, sometimes you would see nail biting is another thing, or fidgeting, or, nervous habits, like some people shake their legs, or some people, hold their hair and they keep twisting it. Some people pick the skin of their lips, or, any other part of their body. Sometimes people also have difficulty sleeping or staying awake. So those are some things that you excessively see when it comes to the common signs of anxiety. Now, I want to play a quick activity. It's called the anxiety bingo. What we're going to do is now that, as you can see on the screen, these are the different signs of anxiety. So I want you all to think of your personal experiences with anxiety and mark off any signs from the bingo card. So, right now, because you're seeing it on the screen, in your mind, just understand if you're able to get like one line right, or the entire bingo sheet right. Whoever gets, either a line or, vertically or diagonally, horizontally, you can just say bingo. So if you, let's say you say that, okay, mind going blank has happened, muscle tension has happened, nausea has happened, headaches or migraines happen. So if these 4 things have happened to me, I would say bingo. So you can put that on the chat. It's a simple, activity just for us to understand that there are these different types of signs and symptoms that we notice on a day-to-day basis. So if you are able to finish a line either vertically or horizontally, you can say bingo. I can see that some of you are mentioning whatever you're relate with. But like I said, if you are getting lines correct, you can say bingo. That is what you can write in the chat. So I think it's a great, any of us here who has been experiencing anxiety, you would see that a lot of us here have mentioned how difficult it is for us to, go through our day, because these are the different kinds of signs we all have experienced. So I think to normalize it would be the first thing that all of us should do, that, we are not alone in this. There are so many of us who feel exactly the same way that we do. I can see quite a few bingos. All right. Top row, second line. Right. Top row, I think actually top row is pretty common, right? Forgetfulness, procrastination. Sometimes because of the anxiety, you also notice that your body is trembling. Imagining the worst case scenario, that is so true. Like all of us do it, right? Where we feel that probably it's the only way to handle the situation, wherein we just imagine the worst case scenario and it just prepares us for what could be there in future. Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your responses. And that's exactly what, we need to, like I said, normalize over here, which is why we are talking about the most common responses to anxiety. So when we are thinking of anxiety, it's important for us to understand that the fight, flight, the one that you're seeing on the screen, the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response is a very natural way, like a natural physiological and psychological reaction to any perceived threat or danger. When we say perceived, we mean that what you think is a threat. It's not necessary. Remember, we spoke about fear and anxiety. Fear is to a real threat or real danger. Where someone, you're walking down a street and it's a dark street and someone comes and says this is a robbery. So that is where fear comes in. Anxiety comes in when you're walking on a, probably a dark street, but you are just fearing that someone might come or something might happen to me. So these are, like I said, these are the perceived threats or danger we are talking about. Now, it describes, so the 4 responses that you're seeing, it basically describes different ways in which individuals may respond when faced with a stressful or threatening situation. So what is a fight response? So a backdrop to this would be that, in the ancient times, when our ancestors, they basically had to fight with the situation in order for their survival. So it could be fighting with wild animals for their survival. Fleeing would be, if they had to survive like a tornado or an earthquake, they had to flee from the situation. They had to go elsewhere so that they could survive. While our stressors were very physical in nature back in the day, today it has become a lot more psychological in nature. That is, we might be having a difficult boss, we might be having a difficult spouse, so we cannot run away from our spouses, or, we cannot hit our boss, things like that. And I hope we are not doing that, but we cannot do those things. But our body still hasn't learned to respond to those situations. We still respond in a very physiological way to stressors that we face, which is why there are two more responses that have been added. That is your freeze and fawn. So fight response is, like I said, imagine, like I said, the whole dark alley, and you are you're suddenly, let's say you're walking alone at night, and when suddenly you are approached by a stranger who appears threatening. He hasn't, or they haven't done anything yet, but they appear a little threatening. Instead of running away from the situation or, submitting in the moment, someone who is, whose response is fight in nature, where they fight, their response is a fight response style. What they would do is they may choose to stand their ground and confront the stranger, perhaps by shouting or using self-defense techniques or seeking help from others nearby. Flight response involves avoiding or escaping the perceived threat altogether. For example, consider someone who's afraid of public speaking. As the moment to deliver a presentation approaches, they feel overwhelmed by anxiety and the fear of embarrassing themselves in front of others, that in response, they may choose to avoid the presentation only altogether by calling in sick or making excuses to leave the event early or seeking to escape the source of their anxiety. Freeze response is, when faced with a stressful situation, the freeze response can manifest itself as a temporary state of immobility where you are not able to move. You've just frozen. Like you can physically see that, excuse me, you can physically see that you are not moving. Like one of my clients was telling me about, basically they reached out about something else, but they were just telling me about one of the situations that happened at their house, and they could not respond. Everyone else moved away. So what happened was they were in the kitchen, and there was a pressure cooker that was on the gas stove, and something happened and the pressure cooker basically burst open. Everyone around ran out of the kitchen, but my client stood still. They knew that they had to run away. They knew that the vessel could hit them. They knew that something had fell on their feet, but they just couldn't move. So that example helped me during the session, because I was able to help the client understand that these are the different responses that we give. So in the same way, when, imagine again, someone with fear of public speaking is asked to give a presentation at work. Now, as they stand in front of their colleagues or, audience, they start to feel overwhelmed by anxiety. The heart begins to race, palms sweat, mind goes blank. And rather than being able to speak or move confidently, they might freeze on the spot, unable to remember their prepared speech or not even make eye contact with the audience. Fawn response involves, seeking to sort of appease or, make the other person, the perceived threat that you have in mind, by being submissive or accommodating. It's usually characterized by a tendency to prioritize the needs and desires of others over one's own in order to avoid any kind of conflict or maintain social harmony. So, for example, picture a person in a toxic relationship. A toxic relationship is where it's not a healthy relationship. Okay. Now, where their partner often becomes angry or aggressive. So someone who gives a fawn response, instead of standing up for themselves or asserting their boundaries, this person would consistently try to please their partner and avoid conflicts by apologizing, by making excuses, or downplaying their own needs and feelings. So understanding these responses can help us recognize our own reactions to stress and anxiety and develop healthier coping strategies for managing them. So here I would ask you all to reflect, take a minute to reflect on the last time you used one of these responses. Are you able to think of a stressful situation where you used one of these responses? On that note, we'll move to the next case study. And here you all can tell me if you all are able to identify what sort of a response does Sarah give. So Sarah finds herself in themselves in a high pressure meeting with senior executives to present the results of a recent marketing campaign. As they begin their presentation, they notice that their palms start to sweat, heart races, and mind goes blank. They feel overwhelmed by the attention of the room and the expectation to perform well. As Sarah continues speaking, they notice that their voice starts to quiver and they struggle to articulate points clearly. They feel immobilized, unable to speak or move. Can you identify the type of response, that anxiety response that Sarah is giving? From the four that we spoke about. Okay, okay. All right. So everyone says freeze. There's fight as well. Okay, okay. Okay, so yes, it's freeze. It's freeze, as you know, most of you have mentioned. It is freeze response that Sarah is giving. So now that we've understood that fear and anxiety are different, we've also understood that there are different types of responses we give. Let's try and understand some of the anxiety disorders. So there are quite a few, but we are trying to speak of some of the most common ones. As we mentioned, it's natural to have some anxiety, but an anxiety disorder goes beyond the regular nervousness and slight fear that you may feel from time to time. Anxiety disorders can make it difficult to even get through the day. So let's look at some of the anxiety disorders. So one is GAD, as we call it. It's called generalized anxiety disorder. So people with GAD experience persistent and excessive worry about a wide range of everyday concerns. It could be work, it could be health, it could be finances, it could be relationships, it could be their marriage, it could be their self-identity, it could be them, not trusting in themselves, confidence issues, self-esteem issues. This worry is often difficult to control and can cause physical symptoms like, restlessness or muscle tension, fatigue, difficulty concentrating. Then comes panic disorder. So it is characterized by a recurrent and unexpected panic attacks, which are, like sudden episodes of intense fear or discomfort that reaches a peak, within minutes. So panic attacks can be accompanied by physical symptoms such as rapid heart rate, sweating, trembling, shortness of breath, chest pain, feelings of, impending doom. Social anxiety again, or sometimes as we call it, social phobia. So individuals with social anxiety disorder have an intense fear of social gatherings or performance situations in which they may be scrutinized or judged by others. If you remember, I mentioned that for one of my clients where we realized that they go through performance anxiety. So they may avoid social interactions altogether or, endure them with extreme distress, and physical symptoms could include again sweating, trembling, nausea, difficulty speaking. Some people may also have, you may see that they're turning pink. We call it blushing. But even when someone with anxiety can, have pink cheeks, and, we could call that they are blushing. Specific phobias are, involve intense and irrational fears of particular objects or situations, such as heights or spiders or flying or enclosed spaces. And exposure to the phobia trigger can also provoke immediate anxiety or panic, leading to individuals sometimes go to great lengths to avoid their feared object or situation. In fact, there was this client I'd been working with for 3 years, and he had extreme paranoia when it came to flying. So wherever he had to go, he would always drive. He lives in Bangalore, but he drives to Delhi. He drives to, wherever he has to go. And these are like long journeys. But, the fear is so impending that there is no way that this person could try. In fact, their job also requires them to fly outside of India. And those times what they do is they take some cough syrup and, They just manage their, it makes you a little drowsy, right? So they just sleep through the flight. So these are different things that sometimes people do in order to, when they cannot handle their fear of object or fear of, any particular aspect of their life. But very recently, they've been working on it, and they traveled by flight again. They went outside India, and they were absolutely, it was very, very difficult for them, but they managed a 12-hour flight, and they came back feeling very, very happy about it. So again, when we're talking about social phobias, it's not something that you cannot, specific phobias, it's not something that you cannot work on. You can definitely work on them. You can definitely, with your therapist, you can definitely work on managing the phobia that you have. Obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, it is characterized by the presence of, obsessions or compulsions. When we say obsessions, it could mean intrusive thoughts, distressing thoughts or images, or, urges to do a particular thing which may not be right, or compulsions, that is, repetitive behavior or mental acts performed in response to an obsession. For example, someone has touched, let's say, a pet, and they have to go back to the kitchen to work. But between that act, they have to wash their hands. And if they haven't, it creates like a difficulty in moving to the next act. It could be the same when they're seeing someone else doing the same, that they've touched a pet, but they've gone and, touched something else without washing their hands. So that can be bothersome. Again, that is another form of, anxiety disorder that we're talking about. And PTSD, that is post-traumatic stress disorder, can develop after, experiencing or witnessing a traumatic event. Like I said, it could be like a natural disaster, it could be war, it could be abuse, it could be assault, it could be a serious accident. And symptoms of this include intrusive memories, that is, you keep getting flashbacks of what has happened, nightmares, you're unable to sleep, you are in avoidance of the reminders of the trauma, you are hyper vigilant, like you're always careful around people. And of course, there are mood disturbances that also come. But definitely, like I said, early recognition and intervention are essential for managing anxiety disorders and improving overall quality of your life. Now, when do we seek help? When is it that we definitely need to seek help? So when you see that, the signs and symptoms are persistent, it's going on happening for the longest time, you are noticing that your activities of daily living are interrupted because you have some of these things that needs to be taken care of. Like you're noticing that your work, that is getting delayed, or your relationship with your parents or your siblings or your spouse, or your children, that is getting spoiled. You're noticing that there are physical health concerns because you're not sleeping, you're not eating well, you're starting to see your health is deteriorating. And like I said, if your activities of daily living, because see, each one of us might experience it on a day-to-day basis, nervousness or anxiety, but it goes away. But if it starts to affect your daily life because of which there are delays in, doing what you need to, then that is a place where, you definitely need to seek help. So we're going to look at quickly some strategies that would help us in managing, anxiety better. So each of this has been explained, in the next few slides. So we're talking about the cognitive behavioral strategies. This is one of the most common strategies that, we use at one-to-one, where it is important for us to, identify the negative thought. So identifying the negative thought, and when I say cognitive behavior, like I said, cognition is your thoughts and how you act on your thoughts. And so basically cognitive behavioral therapy is through your thought that you have in your mind, how do you, impact your behavior in a positive way. But right now we are talking about how it, how do we first get to understanding it? So the first step here is to identify what the negative thoughts look like. So that is one of the crucial steps, because that influences your emotions and your behaviors. So to identify negative thoughts, we need to be aware of emotional distress. So pay attention to what your emotions look like and notice when you're feeling anxious, stressed, sad, or angry. Emotional distress often indicates the presence of negative thoughts. So the next step is to recognize automatic thoughts. So automatic thoughts are like, they're very quick and often subconscious, thoughts that occur in response to situations or triggers. For example, if someone is used to shouting at people who are not very nice with them, or someone is used to keeping quiet when someone, another person is probably yelling at them or intimidating them with their words, that is like your almost automatic thought that, okay, this is how I'm going to behave. So recognizing the automatic thought, which is part of your subconscious, will also help you to change how your response should look like, or question the response pattern that you can have. Now, how do you challenge negative thoughts? So, challenging automatic negative thoughts, it helps to ease the emotional and physical burden of anxiety. So, before changing a negative thought, we need to evaluate the evidence for and against these anxious thoughts. So, ask yourself, whether there is any evidence supporting the validity of the thought and whether there are alternative interpretations of the situation. So challenging these, if you remember in the beginning, we'd spoken about catastrophic thinking. That is, we think of the worst possible scenario. In our mind, it has already blown out of proportion. So challenge those thoughts by asking yourself questions like, is this true? Did it actually happen? Or am I overthinking? Is there a way in which I can handle it? Is it beyond my control or is it within my control? Is it going to affect me 1 hour from now, 1 day from now, 1 week from now, 1 month from now, 1 year from now? So asking these questions would also help you to establish if these are things that are really going to be, something that I should be focusing on and paying attention on. Developing a rational response. This will help you to develop a rational response. That is, what is the rationale behind counter attacking your negative thought? So use logic and evidence to challenge irrational beliefs and replace them with more realistic and adaptive thoughts. For example, let's say, you're in office and you're passing by a colleague of yours. You smile at your colleague, but your colleague doesn't smile at you. For most of us, what is the first kind of thought that comes? Can you all quickly share? What do you think happens? If someone crosses, we smile, they didn't smile back. What are some of the thoughts that we could have in our mind? Must be busy, okay. Rude or arrogant. Why didn't they smile at us? How rude. Yes, yes. Most of us think that, right? We are not thinking that possibly the first example that they said, must be busy doesn't come to us until our mind has exhausted of every negative thinking that we could have. Arrogant, they're becoming my enemy. Probably the last time we had a discussion and we disagreed with each other, maybe he's responding or they are responding to me through that. So our mind, starts to just function. Exactly. So we are talking about developing rational responses by asking questions that, can I go up to him and ask him that, hey, I smiled at you, or hey, what happened? I smiled at you, you didn't smile. Can I do that? Yes, I can do that. So let me go there and do it. Let me let me stop my thought. So these are the different kinds of, ways in which you can take rational, or, you can take, you can adopt a more rational response pattern and challenge your negative thoughts. So there's a quick CBT activity that we'll do. So here, consider this example. So look at the first, the first line and vertically. So consider this example, okay, that Jane made a mistake at work, which has triggered anxious thoughts and behaviors. So her automatic thoughts are negative and catastrophizing, that I'm probably going to be fired and I always mess up. This is it, I'm no good at this job. But when she examines evidence for or against those anxious thoughts, she might be able to see that her thoughts are not facts, right? She can ask herself questions in the line of, am I really bad at my job? Are there instances where I surpassed my expectations? Can I always be perfect and make no mistakes? She can also question her catastrophic, thinking by asking, will my mistake lead to termination of my job? Have I been fired before for my mistakes? and what is the worst that could happen because of my mistake. So examining and questioning these negative thoughts will also lead Jane to developing a more healthier and adaptive thought that is realistic. Unlike the thought that says that I messed up, but thinking that okay, I messed up, but mistakes happen and I'm going to work through this like I always do. So let's try this activity with another scenario. So here, let's take the scenarios that my colleague didn't say hi. Oh, this is the same thing that I said. So my colleague didn't say hi to me like they usually do. Okay, so I think some of you shared the automatic thought would be they are angry with me. I did something wrong. We also said how rude. We also said humiliating. We also said that I think mostly we went with how rude, or maybe they are upset with me about something. So what do you think could be an evidence-based question that could be asked? As we did for Jane's question, Jane's situation, can you think of what are the evidence-based questions we can ask ourselves in this scenario? So I can see in the chat, someone had earlier put, is he okay? Have I done anything bad in the previous day? Have I committed any mistake? Anything happened earlier? Okay. And the answer to that probably is what you're going to get. That, no, I did not do any mistake. I did not have any difficult kind of conversation. Did he hear my hello? He must be occupied. Someone in the beginning had said that he must be busy. So that's also one thought that comes. And how can we question our catastrophic thinking here? Where we said that, he is my enemy now, or, I might have done a mistake. So do we think that if we've done a mistake, it is going to be something that cannot be undone? Can I not go and speak with him and clear out whatever could have been the possible? Let's ask him. Wonderful. Let's ask him, if he is someone that you could smile at, then you can definitely walk up to that person and ask that, what happened? Hey, what happened? You seem pretty held up. I said hi to you, did not smile back. And then you never know that one question, probably your colleague must be waiting for someone to ask that, are you doing okay? And that might just change everything. And the new thought could be they must be busy, or they must have had a bad day, or they must just not seen me because they are held up with something. So the idea of, what we are also trying to talk about here is there is always going to be a trigger event. And there is always going to be an automatic thought because our mind has been trained that way. Now what we have to do is, now that we make it more intentional, we make our choices more intentional, we have to slowly unlearn the things that are no longer helping us and relearn new things that are better going to help us. Like I said, these questions that I told you about, in psychology, we call them Socratic questioning. So questioning the evidence of the thought in your mind. He must be my enemy. He must be angry with me. Did I do something for which he should be angry with me? If the answer to that is yes, break it down more. Ask yourself, okay, what was it that I did? Did I close that like an adult? Did I close the argument, or did I close whatever happened between us properly? If the answer to that no is that, then the first, the question that you've asked in itself will help you to come out of that anxiety of thinking, why is it that this person did not smile back at me? So this is something that, I would encourage each one of you to try out next time when you're having an anxious thought. It's a good place for us to, start. These are some of the mindfulness approaches, that we have. These are very quick and easy, and it helps you to, quickly look at what is it that you can do in order to ground yourself. So a lot of times when we are feeling anxious, anybody, here who has felt immense amount of anxiety and has been diagnosed or are showing signs, you would know that it feels like an out of body experience, right? It feels like, what is going on? Like, why am I feeling this way? And it also happens when we are either thinking about something from the past or something from the future, none of which we have, any control over. So there is actually a study that says that 43% of the times the human mind is either in the past or in the future, none of which makes it happy. And I think all of us would agree with it, right? It just doesn't get any better. So these, some of these mindfulness approaches that you're seeing, firstly, they're very easy to find on, Google. So, and each of them take about 1 to 2 minutes. It helps you to ground yourself to the present, to the here and now. So what is mindfulness? It is being in the present, in the here, in the now. Quick question to all of you all. Through a show of hands, can you all tell me how many of you are worried about the next thing that needs to happen after this webinar? How many of you are thinking, Acha, I have to call this person, Acha, I have to respond to this email, or I have to travel somewhere? Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your responses. And this is again very human. We as human beings, we are wired in such a way that our mind will always keep fluctuating between, oh, ये मैं ठीक कर सकती थी, या ऐसा क्यों जवाब दिया, वैसा जवाब देना चाहिए था. Or we think that आगे क्या होगा पता नहीं. बाकी लोगों ने तो बोला कि बहुत टफ था ये इंटरव्यू, मुझे मिलेगा कि नहीं, मुझे ये रोल मिलेगा कि नहीं. So many things like that, right? Our mind is wired in that way. So it's nothing that any of us are doing any differently. But now that we recognize that this sort of a thinking is not helping us to be in the present, because of thinking of that, what is going to happen 5 minutes from now, and you have absolutely no control over, you're missing out on what you, me, and the entire team is discussing here, right? So those are some, mindfulness approaches really help us with that. So I would again encourage each one of you to, see how you can work through this. And yes, of course, the self-care practices, I can't lay enough emphasis on the need to do regular exercise. It can be a quick 20 minutes, home-based exercise, but something where the body is moving, because someone who
Madam,
feels
previous slide,
anxious.
ma'am.
Sorry?
Previous slide, please, madam.
What about the previous slide?
I have some doubts.
Okay, sure.
This mindful breathing means it is like a pranayama.
Sorry?
Mindful breathing. And
so it's mindful breathing. So mindful breathing is, where you basically, again, like I said, it is for you to ground yourself to the present. So, how you can do it is you close your eyes, you bring your attention to your breath. So breath should be your anchor. And, hold it in for a few seconds. And then while exhaling, continue to inhale and exhale and, hold it in, exhale. And while doing that, notice how your body feels with each breath. Like as, the breath enters the body, when it leaves the body, focus on how, your chest feels when there is a rise, when there is a fall. When the air is passing through your nostrils, how is it that you're feeling? And every time you feel that your mind is wandering, gently bring back your focus to your breath without any judgment. So in mindfulness, what we say is that, you need to be present. You need to be aware of your present. You need to be aware of your senses. So using your senses is a great way to bring us back to the present. So that is your mindful breathing, where you're mindfully breathing, but at the same time.
Will pranayama helps for that? Pranayama.
I mean, it depends, it is like something that you can add on to your, if you're doing pranayama, and if you are noticing that it is, you are doing all of these things, you can continue doing it. You can sort of mix and match and you can continue doing it if it works well for you. The idea being, like I said, we are not telling ourselves that I'm not supposed to think of a certain thing, but we have to keep moving forward, looking at what the present situation is.
Then body scan meditation is nothing but meditation. And next
and
one
you are
is,
scanning your body,
okay,
bringing awareness
scanning
to your body while you are meditating. That how does my, neck feel? How does my shoulder feel? How does my hands feel? How does my leg feel? How does my stomach feel? So as you breathe, you're starting to see, okay, my head doesn't feel very great. I feel that there is stiffness on my shoulders. I feel that there is stiffness on my neck. So, through that, you are also, again, getting in touch and understanding how your body feels with each breath that you are taking.
What are the grounding techniques, man? These are the 2 grounding techniques.
Grounding techniques, there are different kinds of, grounding techniques that we have, which is why I said that,
नहीं, वो विश्वास का और उसका बन गया है अब अविनाश का, उसका जो तीसरा लड़का है उसका नहीं बन पाया, उसका कुछ शुगर है।
Yes, yes, please. You were saying something about grounding technique. So, like I said, grounding technique is basically, there would be a lot of grounding techniques on Google that we would see, and there are multiple kinds. There's something called as 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. That is basically, again, the use of your senses. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can, smell, 2 things you can taste. So, it's like that, again, using your senses in order to bring yourself back to the present. And there are multiple kinds of grounding techniques that can be tried out, which would, depending on how you are feeling comfortable with each of them, you can go ahead and try them out. Does that answer your question?
Yes, madam. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Again, in self-care practices, like I said, can't lay enough emphasis on making sure that your sleep and appetite is taken care of. Every body requires up to 6 to 8 hours of sleep, so that, well-rested sleep, so that you are able to function better and you feel ready for the next day. Appetite, focusing on your diet. If there is anything that has been prescribed, looking at ways in which you can try it out. Limiting exposure to stressors would be identifying key ways in which you can identify where the triggers are coming from. If you're aware of the triggers, you can be better prepared. If you're not aware of the triggers, you won't feel prepared, and again, you would feel a sense of anxiety. So here again, there's a lot of requirement in terms of, social support and connection. Everything cannot be done on your own. You need that kind of support. You need to be able to also maintain connections. Again, this is something that we as therapists always talk about, that social support plays a vital role in managing anxiety. So maintaining connections with your supportive friends, family members, support groups who can offer empathy, encouragement, reaching out to, professionals who can help you out with all of this will always be a great way to, work on your mental health better. And this is one last activity, that I would like you to think of. One is, identify 3 exercises or practices that you would like to implement in your life. And keep in mind that the goals have to be, realistic, not like, okay, from tomorrow onwards, I'm going to do 2 hours of gym while you haven't, exercised at all. 2 hours can be your long-term goal, but your short-term goal would have to be probably sleeping on time, so you can wake up a little early than all your usual days. So think of, it's a reflective question that I'm leaving with you all. And while you're thinking of this, also think of one go-to person that you can think of, or more than one, who have been very supportive. And these would be your social support system. So while I'm saying all of this, I also understand that it may or may not be possible for each one of us to, work through some of these areas, because you need a lot more guidance, you need a lot more support. And that is why we have one-to-one help. As I said, we have, counseling as a primary service. We also have website resources where there are articles, assessments. We also have seminars such as these, where we try to create more awareness around day-to-day concerns that we have. So quick look at how the website looks. On the top right-hand side corner, you can sign up with us, register with us. It's a free of cost service. It's also a confidential service. So no names or identifying details of any individuals is shared with your company. Only numbers in terms of statistical data is provided to the company. Because it's a free service, the company would like to know if the employees are making use of the service. Yes, so with this, we come to the end of the session. I would encourage each one of you to read through the articles, take a few assessments, get a feel of how this works. And once you feel ready, please feel free to reach out to us. So thank you so much, everyone, for a wonderful session. A lot of discussion that happened. Shiny, there was someone who had a feedback for one-to-one help. They mentioned in the chat. I can't find them, but in case they can get in touch with you, I would like to get on with the feedback part of it. Just mentioning it out here. Yeah.
We deal with unknown fears. How can we deal with unknown fears? We are not aware of what is the triggering factor, but we are fearful. Dealing with
Right,
anxiety,
no, so
we
like
are
I
not.
said,
No.
Right, can you give me an example of unknown fear that you're talking about?
Sometimes feeling anxiety, but do not know the reason behind.
Right, right. So I think to start with, what we'll have to do is we'll have to identify where is the trigger. Like, in what situation do I always feel that there is an unknown fear? Is it in only at work? Is it only when I'm visiting some people? Is it only when I'm socially present in a particular place? Is it only when I am, doing a particular thing, or do I see it across? So finding out the trigger will always help us to understand where is it coming from, or why is it that I'm feeling, a certain way. But like I said, to begin with, the awareness will come when we are being more intentional of the choices we are making. So those are the two major things that I would say in order to deal with, something that you're not aware of, identifying where it's coming from.
मैडम नमस्कार।
Hello.
मैडम, ये मेडिकेशन और काउंसलिंग के बीच में there is a fine line. I have some family relatives who are suffering from anxiety for long period. And when does one know that one has to go for medication and counseling or counseling?
I didn't get the last bit of it, sorry.
When does one realize that one needs medication and counseling is not sufficient?
I think that realization will come when you are able to meet a professional. It is always ideal that you start out with a professional. By professional, I mean a psychologist or a counselor. Meet with them so that, they can guide you if you require. They might be able to see, like, for example, as a psychologist, when someone comes in with, signs of anxiety, I do let them know that it feels, and not in the first session, post like a couple of sessions, when I'm able to see that, okay, there are some signs there. I do tell them that you might be showing signs of anxiety, but as a psychologist, we cannot, diagnose anyone. Diagnosis can only happen through a psychiatrist who's a doctor. So in that situation, then, you can probably move to that length to understand if it is something that requires a psychiatrist, or can I work with my counselor, and that should be enough. So that is where you recognize it. I mean, I don't think people would be able to make that judgment call by themselves. You will have to go through a professional.
Thank you, madam.
All right.
Anyone else? Any other query? Vidya, thank you so much. We extend our heartfelt gratitude for your insightful presentation. Like, it was lovely. And your expertise and your dedication, actually, I should say, navigating the complexities of anxiety management, it has really enlightened all of us. And I also very, very much thank you. And I also extend my sincere thanks to all the participants, like, who all have joined us today. It was lovely to see how engaged, everyone was in this entire session. And your thoughtful contributions really made this webinar a success. Thank you, Vidya. Thank you all once again for your valuable time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.